very much.
I am Hina. I welcome you all to the session one of 5-day online FDP organized by Department of Biotechnology, NIT Greater Noida. This FDP is sponsored by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Lucknow, UP. For session one, I invite Professor Pawan Kumar Dhar, Dean in Department of Biotechnology, JNU, Delhi. Professor did his PhD in 1993 genetics and academic council member. Also served as director for systems and synthetic biology at University of Kerala, Thiruvananthapuram for 5 years. He has headed RIKEN, Japan, and Tata Consultancy Services for 2 years. He has also been a member of Management Board Bioinformatics Institute, A-STAR Singapore for 4 years. And the list is very long. It's a pleasure to have you here. The mic is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Hina, for your kind introduction. I'm sorry, I'm using the Mac system and it does not allow me to switch on the video. There is some issue with the browser Safari that I'm using. So if you permit, then I would like to have my interaction in the same way without video.
हाँ हमसे दूर रहो सही रहेगा.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. So very good afternoon, and it's wonderful to be here sharing my thoughts, and I'm sure you're going to have excellent talks following this one, and it's a very, very important event. And as a faculty member, you always want to know what's the best way to communicate and reach to the minds of people who are in a growing stage and they are more impressionable minds, and what kind of impressions do you put on their minds, what kind of thoughts do you deposit, because once you make a connect with the mind, then it's possible to evolve them, and it is difficult many a times to understand what's the best way to go forward, because there is a role of not only the formal processes, but also the personality does play a very big role in shaping up the way the communication and content is delivered. So though in the next few days, next 2 days, you'll be going through a lot of SOPs and do's and don'ts and the best case scenarios and platforms and so on, end of the day, in my view, it is all about the individual, how we program our thoughts so that they reach the intended destination. So today, I'm going to give a short presentation. The way I perceive it, this is not necessarily the best way, and I'm sure you have your own ways of reaching out to the students. I'll just switch on the presentation and then we can go from there. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, sir, you're audible. And you can see your
You can see my
PPT.
desktop?
I can see, yeah, yes, sir. Your desktop is
Now
visible.
is it okay?
Yeah,
All
perfect.
right. Thank you, ma'am. So the whole journey is to navigate this space of pedagogy. And how do you navigate the space given that the kind of crowd that you face is always changing? There's nothing constant. And how do you reach out to people? And how do you filter out who is genuinely interested and who is just window shopping and he has come for a degree? Of course, all of us get to know those things in due course of time, but eventually, as teachers, it's our responsibility to reach out even to those who do not connect with us or who are missing this opportunity. So pedagogy is not about a certain definitions or a certain set of protocols or platforms, maybe online and offline. It is more about adding your own personality to the content and then communicating it effectively. So eventually, you upload a certain content in the space and then download it in the person that you're talking to with the hope that it makes some impact. Ultimately, the impact is very, very necessary, because if the impact is made, then only there's a possibility of discussion, or there's a possibility of evolution, or enriching the knowledge of the person and finding new opportunities. However, we also know that the impact that we many times make, and I can connect with this slide personally. I used to teach in Japan at Tokyo Medical and Dental University, and I always used to see that in my class there were not many students, but one student in the front bench. When my lecture begins, he starts sleeping. And when my lecture ends after 2 hours, he used to get up and say, "Oh, your lecture was awesome. Thank you very much, sir." So, this was a little strange, because, he's firmly sleeping, and we can clearly see that. But at the same time, he doesn't want to be rude. So sometimes you make this kind of impact. Or sometimes we teachers take liberty to think that, the students are at the receiving end, so it doesn't matter. We will have a quick nap, and then whenever we have time, then we get back to the content. In both the cases, we are making impact. But how do you handle the crowd or the students in front of you? That is the key, ultimately. So in my view, pedagogy might be considered in so many different ways. But end of the day, again, it's my view. It can be wrong, or it can be incomplete. In my view, content and communication, these are the two major aspects of pedagogy. Now, what kind of platform you use this format, that format. These are downstream issues. Of course, they are very important. But content and communication, in my view. So now we have a large content in the library, and in fact, it has been found that every 5 seconds there is one publication that somebody is publishing, which means by the time you finish the lecture, there would be a couple of publications in that topic that are not known to us. So how can we be current when the current itself is becoming obsolete at every given moment? So it's impossible to keep track of that literature, and impossible to assemble and absorb the diversity of literature that we go through. So the role of the teacher earlier, maybe a few decades back, the role of the teacher was to transmit the information in the most effective manner. And the information was finite, because there was no internet. There were a couple of books in the library, reference books, and the teachers used to refer to that book, or maybe one or two other books, and that's it. But with the growth of internet, with the openness of information and availability and easy access, there has been an explosion of information. So how much is too much, or how much is little? It is always depending on the person. So the role of the teacher is not only to communicate the key content, but also to draw a boundary line or a boundary condition and focus on other traits that they remain constant. What are the other traits that one should transmit to the students, and the students must be having, in view of the fact that the information is always changing? How do you still stay relevant? That is the key of this lecture. So as teachers, first of all, it's our role to simplify the concepts. There are people who like to complicate things so that they make a good impression. They think that they're making a good impression. What they do not understand is they actually switch off people. Now, suppose you're talking of cell cycle. Now, I can tell you that cell cycle or the cell division process Maybe in the books it is like 4 or 5 steps. Each step, there would be at least 50 molecules. If you go to that extent, now imagine if the entire class, you're talking of 200 molecules or 100 molecule. Well, you have made a great impression by portraying that you have a great amount of knowledge. But how many people remember that? How many people get inspired of that, inspired by that? And how many people get switched off? How many people get stressed? So one has to really simplify the concepts. The rest of the details can be made available for a deeper study by those who are very keen to follow that track. But as teachers, first of all, there has to be less text, more pictures, because pictures make more impact than text. Text is for memory, pictures are more for observation and generating some emotions out of it. Then, okay, all right. Then it would be nice to refer to the latest publication, the last 3 years, what has been the growth in the field and how quickly have things moved. So if you consider 1 or 2 major headlines and then append them to the major lecture content that you have prepared, that would make it very, very interesting and current. What is missing in our lectures most of the time is the real life stories. You see, students not only want to know the facts, they also want to know the struggle behind obtaining that facts. So it would be always a good practice to talk about some personal life history of the scientist, whether it is Newton, whether it's Einstein, whether it is Watson and Crick. There are so many stories. There are so many stories available on the internet. The personal life histories. So it would be always a good practice, in my opinion, to add those components, the real life stories, because they connect people with the real situation, the way they existed. Otherwise, people will think that, okay, this person was very intelligent, became successful, is a star or she's a star, and we are excited to know that such a thing existed. They will never know that there were maybe 99% failures, which this person had to really withstand and had to really, go through that difficult phase. And then maybe the success was not an outcome of intelligence, success was an outcome of chance. So when you have such kind of stories added to the lectures, that really makes it, it deeply connects with people, and they may not remember the fact, but they may remember the story behind that fact, which is itself good content. It's very important to make the training experiential. If you give the facts as it is, these are the data that are available. And so one can say that the length of DNA is so much, the DNA winds around its axis 10,000 times, maybe to make a chromosome. And then DNA has 2 strands, or it can have 3 strands. It can have left side, right side winding. And it has so many other features. So the data gets piled up on the top of each other. These facts, or this is what I call as numerology in biology. This numerological data may sound very impressive, but end of the day, person has learned nothing, because the knowledge is not experiential. Now, if you, so for example, we had this, when we had chemistry class, we used to say, what is our acid and base radicals? We used to have those experiments that we are given a salt and we are asked to determine, tell us what is it made of. Every step we used to see what is the color of the solution or the precipitate, and then go to the next step, and finally find the secret ingredients of that salt. This used to be an experiential knowledge, so it used to register in the mind very clearly. We have to, sort of use our own examples to build up that narrative. So, for example, we don't do that.
Sir, Pavan sir, you are not audible now. Your mic has been muted. Kindly unmute your mic. Sir, your mic has been muted.
Okay. I'm sorry. Did you hear
Yeah,
so far what I was saying, or did I?
yeah, just now, 30 seconds past it got muted. Just on this
Oh,
slide,
I
last
don't know.
slide.
This happened. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't really realize that.
No problems. No
Okay,
problem. Yeah.
please do tell me, because sometimes the cursor moves here and there, and then I don't know what's happening. And
Sure.
so, is it okay now?
Yes,
Am I?
it's okay now.
All right. Thank you. So I
Yes,
was saying that.
audible and screen is okay.
Thank you very much. So I was saying that, let's say rain is falling, and the rainfall itself, we can connect four different fields. If we are able to think laterally. So one is that when the rain is falling, we can think in terms of physics, gravity. When the rain is touching the ground and a certain aroma, certain fragrance is emitted from the earth, this is chemistry. And when the rain falls, and you will see microbes appear in those spots, if the water stays for some time, we can connect with microbiology. And the fall of the rain, uh, what is the speed of the rain, how much of rain, we can even build mathematical models. And then we can also connect this with the geography to see the distribution of the rain. What kind of microbial population or plant species arises? So I'm saying with just one data, you can connect 4 or 5 different fields. Now this becomes experiential because all of us have experienced rain. And these are the examples which connect with the students more deeply than saying that, okay, this is the average rainfall, there are floods here and there, and people are cutting trees, and well, everybody knows that. But is it possible to somehow give this lateral examples to connect people more deeply? Uh, you see, we are not a career company. We are not here to deliver information straight away and then hope that they have received the packet and our role is over. We are not a career company. We are faculty members, we are scientists, and we are teachers. We generate knowledge and we distribute knowledge, thereby completing the feedback loop. So we have to be really innovative in the way that we make an impression in these young minds. So we should be including in our narrative, whether it is biology or chemistry, or whether it is physics or any other subject, or mathematics, or social sciences, any kind of subject, the history of the place where this work was done. This is very important because that connects people with the context, not with the content, with the life history of the person who actually worked in this area, what kind of struggles they went through, and how did they make this discovery. Now, we may not say this in every lecture, but maybe if 50% or 30% of the lectures have this content, that will be much more impactful and appreciated by the students. So the course content, in my view, needs to be hands-on, 70%. Bulk of it needs to be hands-on, simply because, you see, as I was mentioning a while ago, the number of publications that appear in the literature database, they are multiplying every moment. Every moment you have more and more publications being deposited. So that means your theory is obsolete by the time a person graduates. A lot of new facts have come in. And how much do they remember from the previous class? Imagine, maybe 5%, maybe 1%, because once they have passed the exam, they don't like to look back. They just want to see what is my next, responsibility. What is the course curriculum in the next class? So theory, in any case, becomes obsolete. How much of the theory do we remember ourselves when we were students, passing from one to another class? But the moment it is hands-on, so somebody doesn't know how to ride a bicycle, and suddenly, after a few trials, she or he can ride the bicycle. This remains throughout life. You don't easily fall down. Same way, if we are talking of DNA or cell culture or microbial contamination or microbial, identification of the microbes, something like that. when people are made to go through that process and asked to find out alternative ways, let's say somebody wants to isolate DNA, well, you do have a clear manual that talks about DNA isolation. Without any error, one can achieve it. But there can be substances which are available in kitchen. And these substances that are available at our home, they can also be used to isolate DNA. It may not be to that level of purity, but still we can do that. When it becomes hands-on, they connect with the data much more. And the outreach part, it's also a responsibility to interact with the school kids, especially those who are from disadvantaged background, and excite them about science, because honestly speaking, we have seen that students in the city are always worried about the grades and the jobs and the money and other things of life. But a student from a rural area, from a disadvantaged background, they value knowledge. They are not, simply doing a mechanical job of getting a degree, but they really value knowledge because they know what's lacking in their place and how valuable this opportunity is. So some amount of outreach efforts must be always, carried on in parallel. When you talk of skill development, when you talk of the hands-on, there are many aspects. One is developing the technical skills, and the other is problem-based education. Say, for example, there are medical students who go for these problem-based learning courses. So, for example, in the first year of MBBS, there are many places where this is practiced. First year of MBBS, first class, this teacher will come and say, okay, you need to operate a tumor which is deep-seated in the abdomen. How will you do this? Oh, they have no idea. They have heard this for the first time. So what they have to do now, to answer this question, they have to know anatomy of that region of the abdomen. That means how the bones, muscles, nerves, connective tissue, lymphatic channels, they are organized in that area. They also need to know about physiology. What is the biochemical fluctuation? They also need to know about biochemistry. That means physiology at a higher level, but biochemistry at the molecular level. And they also need to know about anesthesia. So which means just one question gave rise to the need to know 4 or 5 different things at the same time. So this kind of education is always more impactful than a fact-based education wherein the application is not very clear. Then it would be nice to have live projects with the companies, if possible, case studies. I think you will have a lecture on that. One of my colleagues from JNU, he's an expert in case studies, so I hope he transmits this information, Dr. Balaji. So I'll not like to touch upon this aspect. Creativity exercises, yes. So simple observations, which everybody is observing, you can come up with fantastic conclusions from what everybody is observing. If you have ability to give a non-obvious answer or a non-obvious aspect to an observation which is very, very routine, then you make a big impact. So we'll go through those examples in a moment. Seek feedback from alumni, because when they go to different places, they do experience different things, and then they realize how good was the course or how much improvement is needed in future, given that industry is requiring a certain upgrade on this or in training in a different way. So please do engage your alumni to get the feedback from the industry or from their new workplace. So yeah, we talked about it. How quickly should the content change, given the fact that this knowledge is coming up in a big way every moment. You see, we live in a VUCA world. Now, this term was coined by US military, but then it has found its expression in almost all the spheres of life, because the world in which we live is volatile in terms of its speed, magnitude. It's uncertain. The information that suppose you had an expertise in a certain programming language, let's say you were an expert in Fortran or C or C++, and now suddenly you see that the high level languages have made a bigger impact. Now you need to know Python, Ruby, and something like that, or maybe now AI-based languages have made their inroads now currently. So that means whatever you learned 10 years or 20 years back and you thought this was the state of the art is no longer relevant because the world has moved very fast. So we need to be flexible to acquire new knowledge. And I know that when I got my first job in Manipal University back in 1992, and I observed that the genome sequencing era is coming up in a big way. So I enrolled myself for a diploma course in AppTech, and I used to teach human genetics to medical students. And in the evening, I used to go for learning computer programming, and this was for 2 years, all the languages and databases. I was not very clear why I'm doing that, but it was like that maybe this will be useful and looks interesting. Somewhere it's going to make an impact. And then the field of bioinformatics was born in mid-90s, and then everything came together. So one has to be flexible. One has to be very flexible. Whatever we have learned, never assume that this is going to stay with you for a long time. World is moving very fast. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, these 4 features are, now in view of the fact that we are living in a VUCA world, how can we be still successful? Now that is the key. Because our age-old competition for memory is over. You know, robots, your computers, they can store much more and they can recall much better. Am I audible? Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, good.
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Thank you. So our age-old memory competition is over because now, you know, the memory recall is amazing. In robots or in the computer itself. You know, you pull out any file, you can get all the content as it is. So we cannot compete because the AI is coming up in a big way. We cannot compete with robots or machines or, you know, such systems in the space of memory. We need to do something else. And so to make our students future ready, and this word future ready is going to, if you go to different you know, top 10 universities, you will see this term being used very frequently because people are now saying that how can you make students ready for a future which is uncertain? What kind of skills? Because the skills, the knowledge that is getting obsolete every few years, it is getting obsolete. Still, how can you make sure that students are successful or they are future ready? Well, one of the things is focus on skills. Focus on skills, not that the skills will last for long, but at least there will be a significant overlap and they will be used more than the theory. The skills will be applied in certain organizations and practically they can demonstrate, you know, it can be a better indicator of success. So skills, that is why everyone is focusing on skills more than theory. And there are universities where teachers say that I'm not going to teach you anything today. I'm going to teach you whatever I'm doing in the lab. If you want to come, fine. If you don't want to come, that's your choice. This is happening in the US in big universities because the focus is on skills. And so we have to make courses also career oriented. You know, not only that we teach them what is exciting theoretically, but also we make sure that we make it relevant to their requirements. So some amount of you know, exposure or attention on what is needed by the industry or what is needed by the employers will be always more useful. And so therefore, since we're living in a VUCA world, sharpening intelligence more than memory is the need of the hour. There was an IBM study where 1,500 CEOs across the world were asked this one single question: what is the most important factor for success of the future leaders? And there was a unanimous answer. All of them replied just one word. They said the creativity is your biggest determinant of success in future. Not integrity, not hard work, not sincerity, loyalty. Of course, all that is needed, but these are background constants which are needed anyway, but they do not assure a success. Just because you're working hard, maybe 15 to 18 hours a day, it does not mean that you'll be successful. It only means that you are covering more data and more you know, possibility of failures. It does not mean that you will be absolutely successful. Success will come only when there are many factors in place, not just hard work, but many factors in place. And creativity is one factor for the leaders. But for the followers, one need not be creative too much. One has to just, adopt the SOPs. But for the leaders, creativity is very much required. And now, the after the content, we are coming to the communication. See, communication is of different types. One can give scientific talks, lectures. There can be group discussions, or you can publish. And media is usually the toughest part because they always publish, almost always publish what they want to publish, irrespective of what we say. So that becomes very, very important to control. Lectures should be based on publications, patents. There are TED Talks. I think you've probably heard about this. Think, Entertain, and Design, TED Talks. There are 15 to 20 minutes talks, amazing, amazing content. And this is something that, sometimes you can even display those TED Talks. They are available on the internet for free. Maybe you can use those TED Talks in your lectures if you feel that there is something special that this person is saying. Though, in the old system, faculty member is supposed to say everything. In the new system, it's a hybrid situation. Then you say something, you also bring in that who will say much more than what you do not want to say, or what this person is more capable of saying. So it's not that we have to own the lecture content all the time. The whole idea is to present them what is best in the community and what will benefit them best. One of the ways by which you can engage these students is a show of hands. You see, when they are sleeping, when they are tired, when they are disinterested, one of the tricks that we often use is we ask some very easy question. Suppose I'm teaching of molecular biology of the cell, and suddenly I'll say, okay, let's stop for a while and let us see. I want a show of hands. How many students are enrolled in the university? Is it 1,000, 2,000, 3,000? Give me the number. Now suddenly they wake up and they will do the show of hands because they don't own the responsibility of the answer, because we are not pinning them to the responsibility. We're just saying just participate and come out of your thought process, because at any given moment of time, because our brain is capable of processing a lot of information, people are also capable of thinking something else during the lecture. And most of the times they do that. Somebody is checking the WhatsApp status, somebody is tweeting something, somebody is on the Facebook, and they are pretending that they are listening to us. But we need to bring them out of this and suddenly say something, couple of questions, space them in 15 to 20 minutes duration, just to make sure that they are still with us and we are able to get their attention. So show of hands is one technique by which, and the riddle is another technique. Let us say I have written this: I can cry, but I have no eyes. I can fly, but I have no wings. Would anyone like to unmute and say what is it? The answer. One is, of course, show of hands, as I said. The other one is riddles. Now, riddles, you may pose these riddles maybe once in a class or once in 5 classes based on the situation, because the whole idea is to wake them up or to bring them back into the lecture content. So when you have riddles, when you have jokes, when you have show of hands, this usually serves as a big buffer. So for this, the answer is clouds, right? It's very simple, but it is just that suddenly people start thinking and aligning themselves. The whole idea is to keep them motivated always show them the bridge, always keep them motivated by whatever technique we apply. Now, these days, one has, got virtual classrooms. Maybe we'll come to the offline mode in 6 months to 1 year from now. But so far, we have to make best use of the virtual classroom, and Google Classroom. Google Class has really, in our experience, been a big boon, the way you conduct the classes. But I'm sure there'll be other platforms too. So how do we make an effective communication is just by practice. There is no other way. Don't read these self-help books or manuals. Just practice the content. Honestly speaking, all the slides that I'm presenting today, On each slide, I usually spend at least 20 to 30 minutes changing the pictures, finding the right pictures, changing the font, size, color, a lot of things. And still, I feel that I've not done a good job. So this has to be practiced. There's no other way out. Confidence only comes from knowledge. Earlier, people used to, in many cases, teachers used to shout at students and thinking that by building the firewall between the student and the faculty member is immune from any question answers. It just doesn't work because those are the old techniques which people are using, but that is really not required because that breaks the communication between the students. Even if they disagree, even if they're sleeping, even if they protest, doesn't matter. We can still engage them and help them walk this path. Presentation should always be clear and concise, less bullets. Do not say, I've achieved this, this is my idea, this is this. As far as possible, do not use the word I or me. Likewise, there is no harm in being humble, being confident and gracious. Do not ask, well, of course, to the students we can ask, but when we are listening to a scientific talk, we sometimes ask questions to make a good impression. Well, that's not needed because I think that sort of is a waste of time if you ask me. But if you really want to ask a question genuinely to connect with the field and to grow further, then it's a different thing. Likewise, if you have reached the end of the time limit, then one must always stop the presentation immediately or go to the last slide and quickly conclude and summarize, right? If you do not know the answer, we may not know the answer all the time. So there's no harm in saying it sounds very interesting. Somebody is asking us a question, we do not know the answer. How does it matter? The knowledge is changing all the time. So we are not supposed to know the answer all the time. So there are ways to handle that. Somebody tells us very rudely, they criticize us. There are ways to handle that also, as you see on the slide. Praise them for their intelligence, because at least they are doing something wherein our mind has not gone. So they are thinking beyond us. So praise them. As I said, some people use anger as a firewall to insulate themselves from the questions. And that is what exactly is not needed if we want to be a good teacher. Scientifically, it has also been seen that emotions change the chemistry of the body. As you can see, if you're happy, the picture on the top in the middle, if you're happy, the whole body is vibrating with energy. As you can see, these are the scientific data which have been published in a very good magazine, in a journal. And if you have anger, half of the body is black. Because of that means you're absorbing, you're burning a lot of your energy. Instead of emitting energy, you're burning energy. And likewise, when they're depressed, and so on. Therefore, if we want to transmit the information, we need to be energized. So happiness has to be maintained at any cost. It doesn't matter. No matter what, one has to maintain. I quickly recall that when there was a couple of years back when I was teaching in JNU in a particular class, a lot of students came to my class. They said, no, we want to stop the class and we want to address the students. And these are the student union. One of them is in the jail right now. So these were the big problems that we have gone through in JNU. And so they came to my class and they said, we will not let you speak because we want to talk to the students, and there are big issues going on, bigger than their studies. So when I saw this girl and seven or eight boys supporting her, I said, yes, please do come in and take my place, because honestly speaking, my lecture was very boring and they were all sleeping. So thank you for waking them up. And you're helping me. You're not interrupting the class. So they came in and she spoke for 20 minutes. And then finally, when the content is over, I thanked her and all the other students who were waiting to, attack in case, I show some anger. I said, well, thank you so much. You've done a fabulous job, and feel free to come again. So they smiled and they went away. So that's how you handle. What can you do? You're not being trained for this kind of situation, but when you face it, you got to handle it smilingly. So one has to be creative in all the situations. Now, maybe you can unmute yourself, one of you or a few of you, and you can tell me, is there something unique in these logos? Amazon. The whole idea is to be creative. And the Amazon company is a career company. So they say we are delivering everything from A to Z, but with a smile. Okay. Maybe you can attempt another one. FedEx. Anything unique from FedEx logo? So you see that between E and X, there's an arrow. It's a white space arrow. This is the mission statement which says that we are delivering, we're hitting the bullseye. Whenever you give us the packet, we will definitely hit the bullseye like an arrow. You know, it will not go here and there. Sony Vaio, why this logo? Anybody? All right, we're running out of time, so I'll be very quick. This indicates that this is analog to digital, you know, analog signal to 1 and 0 digital. And the apple, the big apple, why is it cut? Why not straight apple? Because when you say cut, it means bite, and this resembles the word bite. So that's why the apple is always cut. Why it is white color? Why not something else? Maybe there is some reason behind that. And by the way, every logo that we people make, color has a certain meaning. So do you see something interesting in this picture? Well, to have a good breakfast, we need a collaboration of many companies, as you can see. So many companies need to work hard to give us a good breakfast. When somebody, this is like a very simple picture, but it can have a non-obvious answer. That is the whole thing we have to train ourselves for. So a pie on a pie, what is the value of a pie? People might say 3.142. Well, this is a good answer, but a creative answer would be, may I have a large container of coffee? This would be a much better answer than 3.142, because this gives you the value of pi, which is of much higher resolution, right? So converting scientific data into a rhyme or a poetry or something which is non-obvious, which they can remember and we can enjoy too. So if somebody has to give the definition of the earth, you know, the earth is revolving all the time, wherein there was light, when there is dark, it is becoming light. So the dark is becoming light at every point on the earth. At every moment, every hour, the dark is becoming light as the sun shines on the patches. And somebody is getting up, getting up, getting up, getting up as the earth moves. So using this observation, I have defined earth as a planet where you always find somebody brushing teeth. Because it is moving all the time, people are getting up now. You can have so many different definitions because this opens up a creative space. What is the color of the apple? I would like to ask people here. Is it red, blue, green? Anybody?
Red.
Red, right? So why did we say red? Is because physics tells us that whatever is reflected is the color of the substance, right? Whatever is reflected into the eyes is the color of the substance. But physics doesn't tell us that what is reflected is rejected. It is not accepted. You know, you throw a ball on the surface, it comes back, it is rejected. It's not accepted by the surface. So what is reflected? Reflection is a rejection. Now, we have three primary colors. Color red is rejected by apple. And we are so happy that, you know, apple looks so nice. Relative data, not absolute data. We are left with green and blue. So when you combine this makes cyan. So is the color of the apple red? Yes, at one level, it's a rejected color, but the actual color is cyan. That's what science tells us. So like that, you can prolong these thought experiments to other colors and other substances. So what do you see? Anybody? What do you see? Do you see an atom? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. Anybody? What do we see?
A circle.
Hello?
Sir, we see a nucleus and an electron orbiting it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, we do see that. Of course, we see that. Why did we say nucleus and electron orbiting? That is what science tells us. So this is absolutely right answer. Now, these are the questions that come in sometimes the group discussions or creative exercises and interviews and so on. To say that we saw a nucleus and an electron is a perfect answer. The trouble is that it is a very tiny part of the atom. 99.9% is space. Why didn't we say that we saw space? Why did we pick up 0.01% of the picture? Is because we have been programmed to think like that. So the complete answer would have been a nucleus, an electron, and a lot of space. We have not been trained. If you ask me this question, I would also say the same answer. Because we are talking of creativity here, the completeness of the observation comes when you say obvious and a non-obvious answer. We have been trained and we are training our students in the sense of hearing and sight. But we do not teach them how to enhance the sense of touch, taste, and smell. And these are also professions, by the way. You know, the tasters and the perfume industry, they hire such people, who have an enhanced perception of these senses. Very soon in future, we're going to have competition from robots, and we will. That is where we will need to enhance our creative skills more than the memory skills. End of the day, pedagogy means that we master the content and we master the communication. If we have mastered the content, made it simple, made complex things look simple, and we master the communication, that means we effectively transmit this information so that end of the day, they also think of a new aspect or a new question. If we have achieved this with the right personality, and the personality needs to be such that it is not, people are not fearful of our presence. They are excited and they are inspired and they want to connect with more and more of the data which is out there. So if we have achieved this balance, sometimes we say work-life balance. Actually, there is no work-life balance. It's all work, whether it is at home or in the office. The balance has to be within us. And when we achieve that balance and make it an enjoyable experience rather than a stressful experience, in my view, that is the right pedagogy and the right way to reach out to the impressionable minds who deserve to have our best. So thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you. If you have any observations or any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Is it clear now? Back to the original slide.
The slide is not visible.
Slide is gone. Okay.
Yeah, your screen is visible.
All right. I'm sorry, my video is not working today on this browser. So yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pava.
Thank you so much, sir. So Professor Dhar nicely explained the role of a teacher, the impact that we have on students, the principles of pedagogy. He very nicely explained the difference that connecting factual knowledge with the real life experience, life projects, and case studies bring on learning. He also focused on importance of skill development and application-based learning over factual learning. He presented his idea of how to keep students engaged and motivated in the class and how to enhance communication with the students. And it was a wonderful lecture, sir. So the stage is open.
Thank you.
The stage is open for discussion. If anybody wants to discuss anything with Professor Dhar, kindly unmute yourself and please speak. It was a very clear delivery of ideas. So
thank you very much. I hope maybe we can hear from the participants about their experiences.
So I request participants to kindly unmute if they have something to discuss.
Or maybe some suggestions to improve. Yeah.
Having a request to all the participants. Please do fill in the feedback form for all the sessions. It's in the chat box. Please do fill it.
I'm sure everyone has their own way of looking at things and way of transmitting the information and building up the content because the requirements are different in different fields. I was talking of science most of the times when I was thinking, but I'm sure from the other perspectives, from different fields perspectives, there are unique aspects that need to be catched. And also, these days, the learning is mostly online. So it's all the more important to be familiar with the online tools. And it is not the question of accuracy here, because many times we are worried that, especially at the time of examinations, whether we are able to accurately evaluate a person or not, whether the student has copied this answer from some resource, maybe Wikipedia, maybe some article, and it is very difficult to exactly know whether it is an authentic answer or this answer is copied from somewhere. Now, to me, these are very minor, tiny downstream issues, which do not necessarily indicate the real potential of the person. Maybe there was a compulsion. Maybe there was easy access to information to somebody. Because mapping a student to a numerical value is actually an insult to the student. Because today you gave an examination and the student scored a good marks, and maybe if the set of questions were different, they would not have scored so many marks. Maybe someone else could have scored more marks. So it is the marks are eventually indicator of their potential on a given day, on a given moment. So if we add creative exercises, or what we have done in JNU, I think Dr. Balaji is the best person to talk about it tomorrow. He likes to practice what we call as open book exams. We also tell them that, well, this is a question. Search the entire internet. It doesn't matter. You will not get the answer. You need to think yourself. So there are different ways of evaluation, but we have to really work very hard on those. We will have more discussion on that later, maybe. Yeah. If you have any.
Yeah. So especially in these online era, like what we are doing right now. So in that, these open book exams are a very interesting thing to do, because otherwise also, like usual offline exams that we used to conduct before, now we have to conduct the same exams online. So obviously they are students, so they are not doing it very honestly. They are obviously Googling it, or they are seeing slides and or notes and copying it from them. So
Yeah,
in
sure.
this, yeah, so in this thing, open book exam is a very, I think, interesting thing. But just that we should know what kind of questions to be given in that, because I personally feel that open book exams are more, they are better than normal exams that we conduct, because they are more based on learning, and open book are more based on uh, what we know, the knowledge, our logic.
Yes, absolutely. I think I will talk to Balaji and maybe he will describe his experience and practices about the open book exam tomorrow. And yeah, they're more difficult for the faculty members to prepare, but they are the most interesting ones, yeah, if we have time. Yeah.
Interesting, as well as they are the true measure of what a student has learned.
Bilkul,
That's what my idea is.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't have any other questions or any other things to discuss, so I thank Professor Dhar for his valuable time and delivering a very wonderful lecture to us.
Thank you very much, and my warmest thanks always to Professor Rashmi Mishra for having invited me here and given this platform and opportunity, because this is one unique opportunity to discuss each other's practices and learn from there. So thank you very much for having me on board today, and all the best for the future. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. The pleasure is all ours because it's learning for us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
So the lecture is over for now, and for next lecture starts at 2:30 p.m. Kindly join that session. Thank you.